Alright, ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. Brace yourselves. We're going to talk about PvP. Oh, we're getting involved. Mainly because so many of you were asking my opinion, as realistically, there aren't a great many places that deal with the PvP side of things on a more rational level. And I say that as somebody who's just spent so long going through feedback from PvPers from all over the internet. And my God, you guys, what is wrong with you? You make it so hard for Blizzard to do anything. I'm surprised they even fucking bother at this point. Really? You guys are nuts. Absolutely nuts. What I've gathered from today is apparently everybody melts faces wearing green quest gear because 7% is where they will live forever in their entire lives. Apparently there's nothing in between that. It's either 0 or 7%, and that's where I bowed from. And of course, there are plenty of complaints who openly just PvP to outgear people, which is fine actually, and leads to some of the things we're going to address today. So what focus are we going on? We're going over the stuff that Blizzard's announced? Not really. What we're going to look at is something that spurred me, or I was spurred from an email that I received from somebody who was kind of logical about things and said, how does this long-term affect the game? It was a long email, but the crux of it was, do you think this might happen and this might happen? And some of those points I think were really relevant, and they drift over into the PvE side of things. So, the idea going forward that some of this is based on is that there is no longer PvP gear. And what they mean by that, of course, is no such things as resilience, PvP power, and all that kind of nonsense. There's just gear. It's just gear that you wear, right? It has stats on it, and then they'll sort out some kind of scaling and templates and all that kind of stuff to make everybody reasonably equally matched inside of the PvP realm. Now, in order for that to work, they don't want people to think they have to go raiding to get the best gear, and they don't think that you should do this kind of mishmash between the two. Here's one of the big issues that may occur, and I'd be interested to see how many of the PvEers feel about this. Obviously, PvP is not got PvP gear. So the good thing about this is that just the gear you acquire works both ways. And this is something that's really exciting for someone like myself. Occasionally, maybe I want to do a BG. But because I don't do PvP a lot, then I go in there and I don't have a lot of the stats necessary to be relevant inside there. And basically, I can maybe chop someone up every now and again. But ultimately, I'm a bit of a third wheel, right? I'm a bit of a third wheel because I don't have any of the stats that are relevant in PvP, and I can get crushed by someone who's really incredibly weak compared to my playstyle, right? Play-wise and their ability is much worse than mine, but they can crush me because they just completely demolish me in stats. Ordinarily, I would be fine with that, but it does mean that I tend not to bother going in there because I'll just be annoyed and frustrated. So with the new system, we'll be able to cross over. My mythic raiding gear will not make me a complete burden inside the PvP world. Similarly, and bonus for PvPers, is their gear can cross over into PvE. If they decide they want to raid and switch it up, they don't have to start from scratch again. So it works both ways. If you want to go and try the other thing, or you want to have some time in that, you're like, oh, you know what, my rating's quieting down, I want to go and start doing some PvP. You're not starting from zero and like, got to get the honor set, and then I got to work my way up and all that kind of shit. And same with the PvPers. You got decent PvP stuff, rewards, because they're going to give you gear from PvP, just gear, not PvP gear, and then you can switch that over into the PvE world and work quite nicely. Hopefully, that's generally the idea that's going to work there. Sounds funky. Now, what if you're a competitive player? Can you, and here's the big question I have for Blizz, can you attain basically the similar level and quality of gear by doing both twice as fast? Because you're introducing an entirely new source of items. And as we know, especially in the PvE world, being able to do considerably more damage or take less damage or do way more healing is quite a big factor in a lot of progress. So if we're pushing progress, and I'm kind of looking at the top end here, are you concerned here, and maybe you should be, is that may feel the need to do both, because that's going to allow you to access two sets of gear in the same period of time, where ordinarily it would be the case that, well, I'll get my gear while raiding because that's where the best gear is for me and that's what I enjoy. But maybe I have to kind of think about PvPing as well and getting some decent ratings there and trying to get something sorted there because I can funnel two sources of gear onto my character. How will that play a role in the progression of not just the top end, but working its way down? I'd be really interested to see that, as Blizzard is making it abundantly clear on the PvP side, you will not need to do mythic raiding or high-end raiding or raiding of any sort in order to have the same level of gear. And we're talking about item level stuff here, guys. So you won't need to do that. So that works both ways, right? So if they're coming from the PvP side of things, then can we get both? Can I raid and do arena and get 2 sets? Or can I collect 2 sources of gear for one character? Can I do that? Because that really upsets the balance a little bit in terms of how items are being funneled into a raid overall. Are you going to have a guy who doesn't like PvP and is like, yeah, fuck PvP, who is like half as geared as the guys who do PvP, and therefore a large differential starts to grow between those two players, right? Are you, in fact, maybe even in the situation where you do PvP for fun and you've got some decent gear where you're now being passed over on stuff from PvE, which is maybe a slight upgrade over the guy who doesn't PvP, and going to have this work both ways? That sounds a little bit scary to me, right? That sounds a little bit on the wonky side, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The other concern that this guy brought up is the long-term effect on this. It's all very well and good. We talked a little bit about this on the web show. It's all very well and good saying that PvP should be about skill. Now, the caveat. Has that ever really been the case, or have there been way more factors such as class balance, right? And, of course, composition. Because we're generally saying, and Blizzard has said this multiple times, they kind of balance around 3v3. One-on-one, you're not balanced. Never going to happen. Never in a million years are they going to be able to balance a one-on-one fight. They're not even trying to do that. What they're trying to do is make the team work. So, having said that, will putting people on an even playing field solve anything? Right. Probably not. So, will put people on an equal gear playing field solve composition problems? No. Will it solve class balance? No. Will balancing be easier? Yes, because now they can focus entirely on PvP talents to try and make things more balanced, but ultimately class balance is different because classes are different. So, no, it doesn't solve that. Does it solve high-end play? No. Because gear wasn't a big deal to those guys in the first place. If you were ultra competitive, or not even ultra competitive, you were reasonably competitive in PvP, getting the gear was never really a big deal. Same in PvE. If you're a raider, gear comes your way because you're killing bosses, and hopefully that's your progress, and by default, gear arrives at your door. Similar if you're a kind of top-end PvPer, gear arrives at your door. It really affects the guys down below. Now, what are the possible side effects of the current PvP system? How many of those guys, if we think of it about a pyramid, right, and at the top are the competitive guys, so this works both for PvP and PvE. I'm not shitting on the PvPers here. Let's real talk for a minute. At the top, we have the progress-minded players. Those are the guys who want to kill bosses. Gear arrives naturally, off we go, and we have things like composition in both PvE and PvP, class stacking, etc., which play a major role in the defining top areas. As we work down this ever-expanding pyramid, we start to get to the less able players, right? That exists. The players are bad at the game. Fucking hell, guys. Do you really need to be upset at me saying that? Probably not. Some of you will be. But as we get lower down the tier, we start to find the less able players. Do you think those guys really want, and here's the big question, do you think those guys really want fairness in terms of gear? I have to double take that question. Do you think the guys, as you move lower down that pyramid, in either PvE or PvP, want to be equal with the guys at the top, and more importantly, be equal with the guys who just started? I don't think so. And the problem is, there's way more of them than there are of anyone else. These are the guys who are the big spenders in the game. Yes, they are. Those are the guys who pay way more money than the very few guilds who are killing the mythic Archimond already, or the guys who are at the very top end of rated arena. They are way, way more of those guys down below who enjoy crit videos, right? Enjoy out, and if we're going to compare it to PvE for the sake of fairness here, enjoy crit videos and also enjoy doing mad DPS inside LFR. The worst players I ever see in LFR are the guys who are sort of normal and heroic, because they do way more damage than the guys who are wearing Tanan gear or doing their basic LFR gear, but they're not doing great damage by any means. If any experienced raider will go, well, yeah, you did more, but come on. But they're also generally the guys with the biggest mouths calling everybody out because they've done some Nolan heroic. Similarly, the most vocal areas of the PvP community tend to be the guys who can't really make it and float around 1800 or whatever it might be, 1500 to 1800, and blame everything else, every problem they have. I mean, realistically, guys, most of you have probably tried Arena. How many times do you really hear the reason we lost there is because we were outplayed? Those guys were better than us, and that was the reason we lost. How many times do you really hear that? Not often. Not often. How many times, similar in PvE, do you hear people complain about things like RNG? Or, yeah, I failed there because I'm a really bad player. Not often, right? The excuses that come out of there are pretty tremendous. However, they also are the guys who go straight to being hero mode when they do I'm top of the damage meter, or whatever, or top of the healing meter, something as ridiculous as that in this day and age. And also the same guys who probably crushed a team in 3v3 because they just outgeared them. Or they had a great day in BGs because they queued into a bunch of newbies and smacked them to the ground and crushed them. Maybe even bring in here the idea that twinking exists for that reason. And yes, I have heard many times the arguments that, oh, well, when you get 10 on 10 twinked Warsong Gulch, it's really good. Fuck off, dude. Yeah, I know. Some of you probably believe that, and that's cool, man. But most people who rolled a twink just wanted to crush people who had no chance ever of possibly competing against you, right? Now, what if we take that away from them? You're taking away the ability to crush. And these are the guys who basically, maybe, most of them, some, I have no numbers here, but we have to surmise here that this is realistically the case, is that those guys who gradually get enough gear so they can crush newbies and possibly target, look, I've done it. We called them squishies, right? In TBC, when I was a heavy PvPer, we called them squishies and target them and go after them. Oh, that guy's squishy. I'm going to wreck his face. I'm so fucking elite. It's unbelievable. And you know that attitude exists, right? Come on, let's not get crazy here. It totally exists. What happens when you take that ability away from them? This is a lot of people we're talking about who probably really enjoy, who get mad when they get beat and get overjoyed and almost hormonally, emotionally involved when they crush somebody's face. There's a lot of people who play like that. A lot of people, I think we have to be careful here, and Blizz needs to be careful, because I'd be surprised if a lot of players want fairness. I would genuinely be surprised by that, if a lot of players want a fair playing field. Because that's what Blizzard's giving them. I'm not sure long term they're going to be happy with that. So where does that leave them if they can't crush every now and again? If they're constantly, if you're just a bad player, and you're constantly getting your ass kicked because you just can't beat people. Simple as that. You can't beat the majority of people because you're not very good. And you just start getting rage. Where does that leave you? This new system, which allows you to be reasonably competitive even in questing greens, right? How do you think this will affect the Flavor of the Month reroll squad, of which there are millions? Yeah, let's not underestimate. There are millions of people who go, oh my god, that class was overpowered. I died in a kidney shot to a rogue. I need to reroll rogue immediately. Now that you can quite literally ding and jump in and be only 7% behind somebody who is ultra geared, right, from that point on, and you no doubt they're going to start giving rewards for PvP very quickly. And there is nobody who PvPs in Greece for very long. So they're going to start re-rolling constantly. And how will this affect the constant rewind of the game? Will that be enough to inject longevity into this style of play? You've got to imagine if it's so easy, and it seems like it's going to be so easy to go back, re-roll, ding, and start getting your PvP talents, which they said you will unlock something for every single PvP talent tree at 20% of the progression, is what they're saying. At 20% progression, you will in fact have unlocked something for every single row of your talent tree in PvP. How big will artifact weapons play into this? I don't know the answer to that, but I can guarantee you, with it being so easy to not have to start the re-gearing process, essentially, in PvP, that I've got to imagine that's going to make the general PvP environment way more toxic way more toxic and maybe detrimental to the game. In fact, certainly detrimental to the game. If people just feeling they're re-rolling all the time, they're never settling into a class, they're getting frustrated, they're getting beat, and then they re-roll and it doesn't work out. I got hammered by that guy because his class was better than me. Common. You can't go on a PvP forum anywhere in the world without hearing that X is overpowered and Y is underpowered. And generally the guy who's underpowered is the guy who's posting and he got beat by a hunter or he got beat by a fucking feral druid or whatever it might be. I don't pretend to know the exacts right now, but let me just tell you this. For 10 years, it's remained exactly the same, right? So it doesn't matter what it is right now. It has always been the same. And they're re-rolling to that. They're not seeing the benefits because the guy who killed them was actually just a better player as well. On top of that, and it's just not working out at all. And you try everything, and you're still not getting anywhere because that even playing field means that you're going to lose way more than you used to. And this is the vast majority of players, which could lead to them quite simply losing way more than they're used to. They're not seeing the growth in power that they had when they started to get more gear than the newbie that came along. And the bottom feeders, essentially, and that's not a derogatory term, the bottom feeder just refers to the easiest guy to kill. And once they're always the easiest guy to kill, where does the game go from there? Does this bode badly for the entire PvP community, except for the top-end guys who this affects? No, it doesn't affect them at all. I think it's a fair question to ask is, who does this benefit? Who does it benefit? It only benefits, really, the guys who PvE, switching over to PvP whenever they feel like it and not being a third wheel. The same with the PvPers, switching over to PvE, not being a problem there. And people who just want to re-roll properly because they want to fit out their comp or they want to try something else properly, and they have the education and the awareness to be able to do that. But for the majority of players who I think enjoy crushing opponents every now and again and actively seek out people to crush, and otherwise outside of that scenario generally get beaten, this seems like a very dangerous thing. And in my estimation, and I could be way off here, but I'd love to see your guys' feedback from your friends who PvP or whatever. The guys who lose regularly and blame things like gear, which is a common and easy escape. Once that's taken away from them and they are constantly the guy who's getting beaten, how will that affect the game going forward long term? I have to wonder. All right, guys, some thoughts to leave you with there. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.